As Giuliani endorses Harris, Caroline Rose Giuliani, that is. She is the daughter of Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, was former President Donald Trump's personal attorney, and breaking publicly from her father now, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris for president, calling Trump destructive, calamitous, and a dark force. All quotes from Caroline Rose, blaming Trump for destroying her father's life. She writes in Vanity Fair, and I quote from her, "I've been grieving the loss of my dad to Trump. I cannot bear to lose our country to him, too." Caroline Rose Giuliani is out front now. She's a writer, a filmmaker, and obviously the daughter of the former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. And Caroline Rose, I know this is your first television interview since your endorsement, so I appreciate very much you taking the time. I can only imagine how hard it is for you to have made that decision, to do it publicly. Can you share, what you went through, Caroline Rose? What made you make this decision?
Yeah, it was definitely not a decision I came to lightly. Figuring out how to articulate these feelings with the storm that I've been experiencing over the last couple years, the emotional storm, was really hard. And also figuring out if I had the fortitude to share it, knowing that it could definitely damage my relationship with my dad in the last years of his life, was really, really painful. But at a certain point, earlier in this election, I think it all felt kind of surreal when Donald Trump became the candidate. It was like, I can't believe this is really happening after everything that he's done to our country, after being the first president to not participate in the peaceful transfer of power. Like, it didn't feel real. And then, I'm recently engaged. I'm thinking about having children. I very much want to have children. And one day I just thought about what I would say to my children in the future. And in that moment, everything just became incredibly real. Like, I want to live in a country, if I have a little girl, I want her to have autonomy over her body. And if she becomes a boy, I want her to feel safe and respected in this country. And no matter the gender of my children, I want them to live on a planet that's habitable. And I would really also like them to live in a democracy. So the stakes all hit me at once. And I knew I had to use every resource at my disposal to get this message out there that we need to elect Kamala Harris if we want a future.
And for you, you have a voice, and you had to decide whether to use it. But that's what's got to be so hard. I mean, I can only imagine how complicated your relationship with your father is, Caroline Rose. But as you say, it's the final years of his life. You love him. He is your father. Have you talked to him about this endorsement? Has this been anything where the two of you have been able to have a heart-to-heart or even a face-to-face conversation?
I didn't let him know I was writing this specific article, but along the way, I've always made my opinions clear, and he does know that I was raised to speak my truth, so I don't think any of it will come as a surprise to him. I still worry that it will hurt him, and I do hope he knows that I love him. I hope that was clear, but yeah, we haven't spoken about it yet, and probably won't for a while.
There are so many people whose families have been hurt and damaged and broken by what we've seen in this, what this country's gone through politically. Is it possible for you, Caroline Rose, to put words around how you can feel the way you feel and be speaking out, but also love someone so much?
Absolutely. I think, people ask me a lot, what happened to your dad? And while I'm sure some people are looking for some kind of salacious answer, I really think the reason I get asked that so much is because my situation is so relatable. It's a little bit on steroids and very public, but I don't know anybody who hasn't lost a close friend or family member over an allegiance to Trump. And okay, politics have always been divisive from the beginning of time. There's been jokes about that forever. But this is different because if you are a woman, a trans person, a gay person, a person of color, a person with disabilities, Trump's actions and rhetoric threaten your very existence. So when someone you love supports them, it's really, really hard to reconcile. I still believe that we should be trying to find the common humanity with those we disagree with, even in this time. But I also see that if Trump becomes the president, that is going to become an impossible task for a lot of people. And the only way our families and our country can have healing is if we all get out there and vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I really believe that.
So Caroline Rose, your father was, of course, had many extraordinary moments as mayor of New York City. You know, he was a true leader. He was a hero in America after 9/11. You know, you lived in Gracie Mansion. You were growing up there. And now what you've seen, I mean, just to go through this, and it's not that you don't know this. I'm sorry, it's painful to list it off. But this is what's happened. He's been disbarred in New York and Washington, facing election interference cases in Georgia and Arizona, filing for bankruptcy. He owes the 2 election workers in Georgia $148 million of dollars. He's being forced to sell your family home in New York City to pay, you know, a small amount of money for those debts. So, Caroline Rose, how much do you blame Trump for all of this?
You know, as I said in my article, I think everyone does need to be accountable for their own actions. And there was some coverage of my article saying I'm blaming Trump. And I want to be clear that I do believe that everyone needs to be accountable for their own actions. But right now, the biggest threat to our country is Trump. So I think it's important to look at the culture that he has created and the way in which he has refused to accept that he lost the 2020 election and get everybody to compromise their values, do anything just to keep him in power, and attack citizens like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. Like, he's willing to hurt his own people just to have power. And Kamala Harris would never do that. She's fought for the people her whole career. We need to elect her.
So, and obviously you mentioned Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the Georgia election workers. Caroline Rose, do you fear your dad will ultimately go to prison?
I mean, of course, that's a terrible thing to think about, and it is a fear, and I don't like to think about it. I try to focus on the future, and I know that we don't have a future as a country, at least not in any recognizable form, if we do not vote for Kamala Harris, because Trump has already made it very clear he's going to try to do the exact same thing in 2024. He is going to try to say that he won this election no matter what the actual result is. So we need to get out there and vote so that it is indisputable.
All right. Well, Caroline Rose, I appreciate your time. And I know it's got to be a very complicated and difficult decision for you to speak out. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.